Mixed Media Music.
All right, welcome to Mixed Media Music, where today we will be discussing the Oscars results. What I thought of the nominees for Best Original Score. Best Original Songs, a whole nother world. So we're going to leave that one aside because there's plenty of music in Best Original Score. So before we kind of get into the films and what the film scores for this year and what I thought about all of them, last year when we did this same sort of thing, I did not really. I use kind of my criteria as sort of just what I like. But this time it's going to be the same thing pretty much. But I want to make sure that I'm defining things correctly according to the Academy. So I'm going to start with that. So the Academy has they have a long history of a bunch of weird and shifting rules for Best Original Score. Starting with when they first awarded it, they would give the award to the person who's the head of the music studio, not the composer. And they have changed things all the time since then. There's a big rule change this year, although I don't know that it affected anything. For most of the history of the Oscars, the original score needed to be 100% original. And that is not true any longer. This, of course, is kind of controversial because Nino Rota's score for The Godfather, the first one, was initially a nominee, and then it was kicked out. They disqualified it because it was brought to the attention of the Academy that some of the music was reused from one of Rota's earlier Italian language films, which is not really an issue these days because up until this year, I don't remember exactly when they changed it, but recently the rule has been out of all the music that is in the film, 60% has to be original for it to qualify for original score. And for a movie in a series, it has to be 80% original. They changed that this year. They kept the 80% rule for sequels and things in a series, and they bumped down the percent of music that has to be original to 35%, which seems kind of absurd to me. Best original score, you can win it, but only 35% of the music in there has to be original.
Yeah, it's really weird.
But yeah, I don't know why they did that. New for this year, makes no sense. If anything, too, the sequels should be lower, not higher. But you should be reusing music. I mean, not necessarily you should, but in a lot of cases, it's a good idea to reuse music from an earlier, film in the series. But that is not my my rule to make. But so let's read their description here of what qualifies. Okay, so their official description is: the original score is a substantial body of music. 35% is substantial. I don't know. It's a substantial body of music that serves as original dramatic underscoring and is written specifically for the motion picture by the submitting composer or composers. So the operative thing there, which we mentioned, I think, last year when we had this show, but the operative thing here is that they actually specify that we're talking about underscore, which is kind of an interesting thing because there is a whole controversy in the 90s when they made it a whole nother category because some people were getting upset that Menken and his films from beginning of Disney Renaissance were winning these awards every year for Best Original Score. And some people in the music branch said, well, the rest of the Academy, they're just voting on the fact they like these songs. They're not paying attention to the underscore. And this was around for like a handful of years. And then the executive committee, I think, of the Academy decided that they didn't like that because they said that no other, award category has such a distinction, based on like the genre of the film. So ostensibly you're only supposed to consider underscore and not songs, but people consider songs anyway. So, but it's important to know that they're focusing on underscore and not worrying about songs, at least definitionally. And they also note, okay, what actually wins the award? Okay, so they say works shall be judged on their effectiveness, craftsmanship, creative substance, and relevance to the dramatic whole, and only as presented within the motion picture. Okay, so that's a pretty, basic definition, right? How effective it is, how well it has been crafted, how creative it is, and how relevant it is to the film itself. Okay, so those are things that I'm trying to keep in mind. That I'm focusing on underscore and not songs, which is important for Encanto. Well, and also that we're focusing on the art itself, and also how it's relevant to the film, which is what I try and do any time I talk about a film score. But just so we know, those are what the Academy supposedly is looking for. Okay, so I'm going to just go through the nominees in no particular order. So I've seen two of these films. I've seen Encanto and I've seen Power of the Dog. The others I have not seen, but I have listened to all of these soundtracks. They're long, especially Dune, which has 3 long soundtracks, which we'll get into when we get to Dune. Of course, for anyone watching, we'll start with the obvious. Dune was the winner, as was pretty much predicted by everyone going into it. Encanto, I think, was maybe like the surprise pick some people made. So we're going to start with Encanto, and I've talked briefly, I think, in a couple of shows about Encanto, but here's kind of my overall thought on just the music. The film itself, I enjoyed the film. I think it did some things that I haven't really seen, some themes that I haven't really seen in other Disney films. But musically, so this is a score by Germaine Franco. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, she was John Powell's assistant for, I think, 12 or 15 years before kind of setting off on her own. And even that was her second career. So she's kind of an older composer. She did a lot of work on Coco, not as the composer or primary composer, but as one of the orchestrators. So she got a lot of credit for her work on that. So my thoughts on the music. As I said on previous shows, I think the music was the least remarkable part of it. And the songs in particular did not do much for me at all. But we're not going to consider those under the strict definition of the Academy. Although I personally like to see, a strong relationship between songs and score. But I'm not sure if there really was a relationship between the songs and score that I could discern easily. But even if there was, I'm not going to consider that. The best parts of this score are where the music is inspired by Colombian rhythms and themes and instruments and styles, and there's a good amount of that in there. She went to Colombia and did some musical research before setting out to write that. And when we get that kind of stuff, I think that's where the score has some life. I think that's it has personality. It's fun. It seems like it belongs to the film. But that's although there's a good amount of it, it's not the majority of the music. That's what I take issue with. The rest of the music, to me, it's fine. But I'm not really looking for fine when I'm trying to pick, the score of the year. I should add too, this is the largest score in the sense of number of musicians playing on it. Out of the nominees this year, for good reason, of course, because of COVID making recording harder. But we still get a decently sized Disney orchestra. But to me, a big Disney film, it's not just the score. The standard is not just to be fine, and not just to be serviceable. That bar is too low. Disney has since the Renaissance, at least, we're really going back to the beginning of Disney and Snow White. The bar has been way higher than that. Say what you want about Disney as a company, and you can say many things about it depending on your opinion of them. But I think their music, the bar they set through their music, is really high, and I think a lot of people agree with that sentiment. People like Disney music. Yeah, to me, I don't know. Like I said, it's just kind of monotonous music. It does everything it's supposed to do. It's kind of like color by the numbers. Like, well, we know what we need. Here it's kind of predictable. We insert it. So I don't really understand why the whole all these Colombian ideas, rhythms and different styles. I don't know why that just wasn't everywhere. I don't know why that artistic decision was made. I think that would have made the film more cohesive musically. It would have brought more life to the film in general. So that's kind of my thought there. What's interesting to me is that, like I said, she was a really important contributor. Franco, the composer, was an important contributor to Coco, and I think Coco did a fantastic job of that. It had its Mexican-inspired tone throughout. And I really am not sure why that wasn't done with Encanto. I think that would have just made the score so much better. Like I said, there are memorable-ish, fairly memorable moments with that kind of Colombian stuff. But the rest of it, it's fine. But I don't like fine. I mean, I want more from a score I'm going to call best score of the year. The Power of the Dog by Johnny Greenwood, the other film that I saw. And, in a sense, it's a good score in that I think it is pretty much the perfect aural equivalent of the visuals and everything, in every sense. So in that sense, it's good. It totally matches the film that it is part of. But if you have seen some of our recent shows, you know that I think neither Irving nor I are particular fans of the film. So,
nope.
Yeah, for several reasons. And, I think the thing that I said about it is that it's trying so hard to be subtle, and it's trying so hard to take this show instead of tell principle. It's trying so hard with these things that it's not subtle, and it doesn't really show anything and there are things that should be told and not shown. And I think the music is kind of the equivalent of that. In case the obviousness of this film, didn't strike you just from everything on screen minus the sound, the music is there to help you along that journey right from scene number one. You know what's going to happen. The music is not hiding anything. It's like, I'd say it's well written. It's well crafted music when it occurs. There was very little of it, very empty, as the film is, very quiet. Like I said, we're doing a whole lot of showing when we should be doing maybe a little bit more telling. In the music community, it's gotten some praise for breaking the mold of a Western, but to me, that's not really a radical thing, because yes, it's not the score for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly or Silverado or something like that. Yeah, but it's not that kind of film either, right? You can't write Silverado big brass, which it wouldn't work, because we're not going out and having a bunch of big gunfights. So to me, that's not really a radical thing. Given what it is, I don't think it does anything too crazy. There are some moments in it, the music at the very end, where it stops in the very last scene, where the music is not as on the nose, about what's going on. And then but in that moment, then I'm suddenly confused a little bit. I'm like, why are we like being ambivalent now? If anything, the last scene is where we shouldn't really be ambivalent, you know.
Agreed.
And it just, yeah, it's a little strange to me. It's just I just don't like, it does what the film does. I know I've said that a lot of times, but like a good example of that, we have this like one nice scene with Rose and what's the name of the brother she marries? I can't remember.
I don't
the brother
remember.
she married.
I probably forgot
one of
half
them
of
is-
what happened in that film already.
One of them, his name is Phil. I don't remember which one is which. The kind of nice brother, we'll say, right? Like they go off and on a car ride and they get out and look at the mountains. She tries to teach him to dance, and the music there it's just so like, to me that's like where we could really grow. Like this is like a really tender, intimate moment, and it's really kind of empty music there. And in the moment it doesn't feel right, and then you keep watching, you're like, well, okay, I guess it's right in the sense that, yeah, the film drops the ball on like that relationship. So again, equivalent of the film in pretty much every way. I think if you want to do, just as I think as a filmmaker, if you want to do something subtle, and you're trying to go for this kind of like not dialogue heavy, nice pictures, long pictures of landscapes and stuff, like you're trying to take these kind of surface elements of someone like Malick or Tarkovsky, well, see what they do with their music. Like Tarkovsky's composer is a guy named Vyacheslav Ovchinnikov for most of his films. Really interesting composer. I'll probably talk about him one day soon. And right, he doesn't do much music in these films either, but it's not, it's subtle music. It's not on telling you everything. So I don't know. I feel like same way that the film itself should look at films that are actually subtle. I'm not blaming Johnny Greenwood here for this, but I feel like the way to go would be that kind of Ovchinnikov manner. Okay, so Dune, the winner, and pretty much unanimous pick. Yeah. So first off, I have not seen this film, so that's gonna color this a little bit, and I'll explain why. Yeah, and if you've watched this podcast long enough, you know that I'm not a huge fan of Zimmer post 2000-ish. This is, a bit of a different score for Zimmer. It's definitely, from what I understand, a passion project of his. He turned down some other offers so he could work on this.
He turned down Christopher Nolan, which is his go-to. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because he really wanted to do this film. He apparently had never seen the original film, so he knew nothing about the music there. And he started working on this well in advance, just based on the book. And this is the reason why there are 3 soundtrack albums. And I don't know about other search engines or streaming services, but if you go to YouTube Music and you try and find the actual music used in the film, it's very hard to find. They want to give you what is called the Dune sketchbook, which is what Zimmer worked on first, pre-COVID, just like extended meditations on various themes, and they're like 20-minute long tracks. And I listened to that first. There's also a soundtrack specifically written for the documentary on the making of the film. And then there's a soundtrack for the film itself, which, yes, borrows some ideas from the sketchbook, but is very different. So I listened to that as well. I did not listen to the music from the making of documentary. I didn't think that was terribly relevant. Okay, so for me, this is kind of hard. It's not necessarily hard to evaluate the score itself. It's a little bit hard to evaluate whether I think it should have won the award for Best Original Score or not. As far as modern Zimmer goes, I think it's maybe a little bit more interesting than things he's done recently, at least for me. You know, I certainly understand why. This is an epic score for, you know, what I understand is kind of an epic film of, you know, epic proportions, vast desert landscapes, and he's going for a very kind of desert-y sound and like a stereo in a way that like he's not literally, you know, doing stereotypical things, but also that like still feels kind of stereotypically desert-y. He's matching the scope of this film. It's also a little bit hard to evaluate because it kind of continues the direction that a lot of scores of his and other people who kind of in the mold of Zimmer are going, where the line between sound design and music is it's been blurred, and with this it's increasingly blurred, I would say.
It makes sense just watching the film.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it, but there's so many things in this, you know, really long score, and you listen to it and you're like, that could just very easily just be what like the sound of the world, you know, like literally like the sound of like the desert winds, you know, things like that. You know, it becomes a little hard to evaluate in that sense because you're combining two different things, two different cinematic art forms. But that is kind of a trend that music has gone down a little bit. I appreciate the fact that there are definite themes in it, although they're not like, they're certainly not themes that one can hum. And they're probably not ones that you are going to like walk out of a theater and be aware of that they existed. But they're developed first in kind of a hazy way in the sketchbook, and then they are in the score itself. They're not like terribly distinct. They have a definite profile to them, which is kind of ascending and then emphasize going down, emphasize a descending half step, landing. And these are all in kind of wordless female voices. Apparently the thought was that the sound of the female voice, that you wanted to give a like sacred sense to it, mystery and sacredness, in his words. My impression is that this score adds an enormous amount to the film. I understand that the film itself, you know, if you watched it in theaters, a lot of people said that the soundtrack was unbearably loud. And I can absolutely see how, you know, all of this kind of ambient desert wash with these themes kind of rising in and out without you really noticing that they are doing that. I can see how that really adds to the atmosphere of the film from what I understand of the film. So in that sense, I think it probably is a really good score in that way, right? Its contribution to the film itself. I imagine that pretty much any other music is probably not going to be as effective with this film, again, from what I understand, like stills I've seen from it. To me personally, though, I can appreciate like the scale of it. I can appreciate the technical mastery in order to make this, like, bring all these, you know, invented sounds together, these invented instruments and real instruments, and all the programming and all the editing that took. Would I ever stick this on again? Probably not. I'm not going to sit around and like want to listen to it. If anything, it probably, if I'm going to listen to it again, it's because it's going to be in the context of watching the film. I also think, to me, it's just interesting that to go for sci-fi now, like this kind of totally alien sci-fi world, you know, we have to go with this like alien sounding, I'm going to say this correctly, kind of alien sounding music that tries as hard as possible to avoid human instruments other than things like the voice. I think you can do that. You can make this, you know, something that sounds very alien and very otherworldly with traditional instruments. There are lots of really cool examples of that, like James Goldsmith, for, like Aliens, or lots of examples like that. Things that sound really, really, wacky, not of this world, but are still like combining, real instruments with electronics. Someone like Goldsmith or Horner too. They're also, despite the fact that these things are, they sound alien, they're also giving us themes that, they're not melodic necessarily. Like, I mean, not something you can sing, but they're like identifiable units. Whereas to me, this is just kind of like the themes. Yeah, they're themes. They kind of fade in and out. You don't really, you just kind of emerge from this kind of ambient wash. So, not necessarily a bad thing, but it's different than. I don't think it's the way that such films have to be scored. So I can definitely appreciate it. I appreciate the themes. I actually think the way that they're they're kind of woven into that ambient wave of sound is interesting, and I can definitely see why it won, just for its scale. But like I don't know. Maybe if I watch a film, it'll make me appreciate it even more. But as a filmic work, as a work of musical art, this is something that I really can like say, wow, I love that. No, not really.
I will say about the film, since I saw it, there's a lot of the score really, well, it's really loud. Well, the music together with the sound design is all really loud. Everything's on top of each other, really. Even the dialogue sometimes gets crushed. And there's very little dialogue in the film. And what this causes to happen with these very long stares into the desert is that the only thing that's speaking, because really the film, in my opinion, isn't really saying much in these long stare, moments, is the score. And so it's like, I almost wish there was more definition to what the score was saying in those moments, to give me more to bite on when the film wasn't giving me that much, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I will say that, like, yeah, there's no direction in the score. To me, granted, I haven't seen the film, but pretty much every track, I couldn't tell you, like, they all pretty much are the same to me. I'm sure that's not literally true, especially if you watch the film, but no, there's no, like, it's not leading you anywhere. If that's what it is, there's a lot of like long looks of a desert. Yeah, I think it's Zimmer letting you stare into the desert. He's not telling you anything. So we got two more here. Two more films. First one is Parallel Mothers, which is a film I had not heard of at all. I looked up the one sentence summary that comes up when you Google it. This is a Spanish film scored by Albert Iglesias, this is his fourth nomination. His biggest score, at least English language score, is Kite Runner, which he did not win the best score for, but that was one of the nominees that year. He also has a lot of like traditional classical, like concert composing. And this is the score that I most want to listen to again. I've listened to it twice already. What first struck me when I listened to it after reading the one sentence summary of what this film is about, which I'll explain that in a second, but I read the summary, I listened to the music, and I said, how on earth does this have anything to do with like this? What the one sentence summary of this film? It's the one sentence summary is like these two mothers walk into like a hospital to give birth at the same time and become friends. The music is like pretty dark and kind of terrifying in some places. And I was like, well, okay. The problem is the track titles are in Spanish, so I did translate them, but that wasn't terribly helpful either. So I was really intrigued because I really liked the music, but I had no idea how it related to this film. I had to look up the actual plot synopsis of the film. There's very little. Well, it has a lot to do with that. That's just like the opening premise. it is a really kind of convoluted tale of a whole bunch of like sexual misconduct and really weird sexual relationships and things like that, and like dead children. And okay, yeah, it's not typical. Not the kind of thing. Not having read that plot summary that I would want to stick in, or stick at DVD. And we don't have who has DVDs anymore, right? Watch on whatever streaming platform. But the music, what I really like about it is that it's a really interesting blend of like traditional musical mastery. It's just so well composed, really fantastic understanding of all these instruments. They're all used beautifully. It's mostly like piano, synth, and some strings, but there are woodwinds that make an appearance and add a lot of interesting color to it. So yeah, it's kind of a traditional score with that kind of modern twist of having the synth, but kind of unobtrusive synth. But it's just so the themes are like very present in it. It's maybe not like most lyrically beautiful score, but it's just it's kind of it very captivating, and it just, like I said, the musical talent of Iglesias is really evident in every bar. So just to a score to listen to for like studying how to write for all of these instruments, I think that alone is valuable. It's a really intimate and haunting score. It has moments of lightness, but never real happiness, which I think matches what I understand the film to be now that I've read the actual plot summary. And he does a really great job capturing dread and tension while having this kind of intimate quality to it. And I think that the instrumental choice, although maybe it would have been larger if had it not been COVID, I don't know. I think it works really well overall. And again, so I just also looking at still some of the film, I think it matches the tone of the film from what I imagine the tone of the film is. I don't know. I really like this score. This is probably this would be my pick for best score of the year. Had absolutely no chance of winning because nobody has ever heard of Parallel Mothers, as far as I know. It's not an English language film, so who knows foreign films anyway. I mean, I think if I were a voting member of the Academy, this would have gotten my vote.
But they pretty much don't listen to all this. It's not like the Academy members are sitting down and listening to all the scores before they vote, or they even bother to have the courtesy to skip the category they know nothing about. They'll just vote anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I know that obviously the music committee has to listen to it, but I don't know how much anyone else listens to all these. Some of these, all of these are pretty long, but like especially Dune, that is a massive soundtrack. Okay, and our final score is Nicholas Britell's, I think that's how you pronounce his name, score for Don't Look Up. And I also really like this score. And honestly, I listened to it and I said, wow, I want to watch this film. I don't really know anything about it. And then Irving posts on Discord that he thought this is a terrible film. Like, oh, great. Well, maybe I won't watch it then.
I'm not the only one, I promise.
Okay. Yeah, the music is it's entertaining music. It definitely wins the award for fun score.
Yeah, I do have to go now.
All right.
Yeah. Also, sorry, I didn't really contribute too much. My internet has been going on and off, so like half the time I heard nothing. Like half or so. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
See you guys
cool.
later.
Yeah, I'll see you later. Enjoy the movie. I was gonna say, Ben, that this that Don't Look Up might be. The score for Don't Look Up was probably the highlight for me. But if you actually watch it with the film, there's actually not that much music anyway in the entire runtime, which is very sad. So.
Yeah, so it is a fun and entertaining score, although I can imagine, like you just said, that there's very little music because most of the tracks, they're not very many tracks, and a lot of them are like 45 seconds long. So very little music in the actual film, I guess. And what I like about it, though, it is a very bright score. It is a bright score, very bubbly score. Those are the two adjectives that come to my mind: bright and bubbly. It's got this kind of spacey, like new age space feel, like kind of like it's in modern sense captured this better. It's kind of a sound that back in like the beginning of space age, I think people were trying to go for, but like didn't have the electronics to really get it. It does that really well, and so it's got this this sense of like space exploration, but not alien otherworldliness that Dune has. But it has that, and it maintains this really bright and bubbly tone throughout the whole thing. And it's got a lot of jazz influence and literal jazz in it, which is it's just kind of refreshing. We get like a jazz with kind of like space synths. It's really, really cool. And I think my note too is that it's a really beautiful wedding of arpeggiated synths and acoustic instruments, which is hard to do. It's hard to have these things. It's very easy to do them, but it's hard to do them really well. We get like jazz trumpets and saxophones and strings, and this synth that just seems like it's part of it. It's heavily arpeggiated stuff. Seems like it's part of the fabric. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a fun score to listen to. Like if there's one score that I'm going to stick on just because I want to hear something fun, definitely out of these films, this wins. I think it's fun enough that I'd stick it on regardless. I don't know. I like it a lot, and the music is, at least to me. I understand the film is kind of not the most serious film in the world, but the music seems pretty sincere. And maybe I think like it takes the appropriate tone, but it's not like the music is a joke, right? It may be going for like a joking tone, but I think it feels like it's written with a lot of sincerity and a strong sense of of trying to do something really beautiful and effective. So definitely, this would be my runner-up pick, number 2 for best original score. Yeah, so those are our five scores. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, like I said, I think this generally reflects the difficulty of using large ensembles in the recording. Large ensembles in the pandemic. So we got some of these smaller scores, smaller forces, other than Encanto. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to me just to see where music goes each year. I was not expecting Parallel Mothers to be, and I saw that was a nominee, like, I don't even know what that is. I hadn't heard anything about it from anybody. I was not expecting that to be such a really beautifully composed score. Go ahead and listen to all of these. I definitely recommend Don't Look Up and Parallel Mothers if you haven't heard those. And yeah, definitely let me know how wrong you think I am in evaluating these things, especially Dune and Power of the Dog and Encanto. I know I've had some people disagree strongly with me about Encanto. Not so much about the music, but music being part of that. So feel free to do that. Either on Discord or here in the chat. Yeah, that's my summary of these scores.
Cool. How would you assess the overall quality of the cadre this year versus like other years? What are your overall thoughts?
There's no score. Obviously, I'm heavily biased towards large orchestral things. Nothing like that. No entries from a lot of the composers that I enjoy the most right now. No Powell, no Giacchino. People like that. I think partially again because of the pandemic, limiting films that are being made and the scope of music for the films that are being made, other than Dune, which has been a work in progress for years. I don't know. I would say I think it this group reflects like that kind of generally smaller turn because of the pandemic. I think Don't Look Up and Parallel Mothers are, representative of good smaller scale, which is what most things are now, good smaller scale writing right now. I think hopefully Encanto is not the direction Disney music is going, because it's kind of disappointing for it just to be fine.
Yeah, hopefully this year will be bigger and better.
Yeah, I'd love to hear some more, large orchestral scores.
So is that it for the music, more or less?
Yeah, that's all I've got. So again, let me know what you think. If you agree or disagree, I don't mind. If you think I don't know anything, feel free to say that.
No, I definitely find it interesting, especially for the films that you haven't seen, like hearing the pure musical perspective. And, I'm thinking like, I can totally see, especially with Don't Look Up, I think the contrast is very large between the music and basically everything else about the film. Because I remember remarking in the first scene that the music was super fun and bright and textured and it wasn't, boring, and I was like, maybe this will be a fun film. And then I was very wrong by the end of it, which is kind of sad, but it happens.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll watch it. See if your opinion influences me too much.
Yeah. Oh, I contaminated the experiment. All right. I guess we'll go over to movies.
Look, tell a man no trouble. I don't want beef, man. I just want vibes. Big man like me, no need for the telephone hype. I got too much getting online. One rule, then dead I'm on site. Wrong move, I bet they gon' ride. No need for the telephone hype, nah. No need for the snoozing. Big whip outside, I'm cruising. Big stick inside, no losing. Better watch out for the snake and Judas is. Don't ask them who this is. I bet they know what I'm moving in. I bet I show it into a dim. How you hate and then lose again? How you hating my vibes? Why you wasting my time? Getting hype on my line. Tell a man I don't want feedback, I just want relax. Brand new whip, two-tone, I need that brand new hit. Like lean back, brand new bits I live in. We pack, man, you never gon' like us. Get them on sight now, let them on light. That way they know I'm more righteous. Look at my life, I'm living alright. I'm nice, you know I'm alright. Cause looking like Christ, no need for the hype or fight or telephone vipers. No need for the telephone vipers.